Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Third Impact Anime Podcast. My name is Ryan, and I'll be your host for today. This episode is also a little unusual because for the first time, I'm outnumbered. I'm joined today by three people from the development team of an upcoming indie RPG called Quartet. So I'd like to welcome them to the show. Welcome Tyler.
Hey, how's it going?
And Peter.
Hey.
And Patrick.
Hello.
So why don't we get started? You guys are three of how many developers on this project?
Yeah, so work with a studio called Something Classic Games, and for Quartet specifically, we have four main team members, us three, and then another Tyler Darren from Canada, and we have a art director who's not direct stakeholder of the game, but has been with us since the beginning, and we have a lot of incredible pixel artists and map designer that we work with as contractors.
Awesome. So, Tyler, starting with you, what exactly are your individual roles on the project?
So primarily I serve as the game's composer and producer, which basically means I just tell people what to do. That's half a joke. No, writing music, help produce. I am responsible for the battle balance. I create most of the battle encounters, design their skills, AI, and test them. But we all kind of wear a lot of different hats, so there's a little bit of bleed. We all have our specialties. My unique specialty is as the music composer, which is I'm the only one who handles that. But we all kind of do a little bit of everything.
Gotcha. That's good. That's cool to hear. Peter, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm the programmer, the kind of the main programmer. I do a lot of that, making bugs, fixing bugs, and mini game. Like I'll sometimes go into the cutscenes and do some coding for like the mini games and stuff like that as well.
Okay. And Patrick, what about you?
I am theoretically the director. I write the story. And I did the big sort of spreadsheet design with all the background numbers and stuff. And
so you basically have the Pepe Sylvia board in your office.
Yeah, it's to some degree. Yeah, I have a lot of references to like obscure, like mythology and stuff that as any JRPG director ought to have. And I also build the cutscenes.
That's awesome. So, guys, thank you so much for coming on today. Ordinarily, I'd start the episode by giving a brief overview of the topic we're talking about, which is Quartet. But given that you guys are far more qualified to do so for this, why don't you tell everybody about the game?
Yeah, sure. So Quartet is a Japanese-style RPG styled after Super Nintendo classics with sort of a modern twist. We like to call it like a neo-retro JRPG. Just a little bit of a mouthful. And the essential hook of Quartet is that it's kind of structured like Wild Arms 3 or Dragon Quest 5, games like that, where when you start the game, there's a non-linear structure to the story. There are 4 stories, thus Quartet, that are played in any order you want. And as you play these stories, you might notice that they are quite different in almost every way possible. They're all turn-based RPGs. They all have the same kind of stats, but they're different in the setting and sort of the themes, the music, etc. And then as the game continues through, it becomes a very linear game, such as like a Final Fantasy VI. So it's basically you start as Wild Arms 3, become Final Fantasy VI.
So for context, for everybody listening, I found this game on Facebook in a group called RPG Sanctuary. Probably 2 years ago is roughly when you guys did the Kickstarter.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, so I found it because Tyler posted, and he was like, yeah, I'm one of the developers on this project. And I was like, that's really cool that we actually have a developer in this group. And my immediate impression was that it looked a lot like Live Alive or Live Alive, however the heck you're supposed to pronounce that game. And like playing the demo, I definitely got that vibe. Have you guys all played that before?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't play the original like Pete, but I played the remaster that came out a year or so ago.
Yeah, I played the remaster myself as well, and it was a fantastic game. But yeah, how did you guys all come together to like make this game? Like, how'd you meet each other?
Tyler sent me an email. I wrote some books about JRPGs, academic books about the design of classic games. 4 of which were RPGs. The second of which was on Chrono Trigger, which I think Tyler encountered back when it was the book. I was selling the book from my own website for 50 cents. um, and he sent me some emails about their game Shadows of Adam, and I said what my opinions were. And they were kind of esoteric and totally off the mark for what they were trying to do. But then they made a great game. And then, Tyler and I just kept talking. And then I did, they just needed just a tiny, tiny bit of help on the DLC that I did. And then everyone else was really burned out, as was very common for after a game project, an indie game project. And then a few months later, Tyler, I think, got the restless itch to make another game. And I was like, I'm down. And I was
Very
like,
nice.
I'm just like, I basically, I think I said something like, I basically have a PhD in JRPG. And
Pushes up glasses.
and at that moment, I was re-virginized. And then
Virgin rebirth.
yeah, it was just like, wow, it came back to me. Like I had teenage acne and like a cookie duster mustache all of a sudden. And I think it was 32 years old when this happened. But we just started emailing each other back and forth some ideas for the next game, what it could be. And that's
awesome.
Built from there.
Yeah. Now
So-
how I got on. So sorry.
I was about to ask, actually.
Yeah, sorry. So I was a backer for Shadows of Adam. So I think I saw a Steam update where they posted their Discord, and I kind of hopped on and played the game. And it was just a nice little. They had an indie dev channel on the server, and I like prototyping games and stuff in Unity. And so we chat about games and game dev there, and I was really really nosy. I was always asking like, hey, so what are you guys gonna do for this in Quartet? And what about this? And what about that? And so like I would bother Tyler Darren a lot, and so he'd say like, oh, we're using Tiled, oh, we're using Yarn Spinner or whatever, and so I would go and like download those and make little prototypes with them and show them off, and eventually they just kind of reached out to me and like, hey, do you want to work on Quartet? And I said yeah, and so I've been on it ever since. Built a lot of the core tech, and yeah, it's been a blast.
That must have been so cool to get recognized by like the people you were a giant fan of.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I don't know, I was a backer.
No, he's a giant fan of me. Trust me.
I mean, I've been there where it's like I get super invested in like a group because I just love their work, and I just like do exactly what you just said, but to actually get like recognized and be like, hey, you sound like you could help us with this. That must have been really cool.
Well, Peter's being humble, but he's a brilliant programmer, and he's also played every JRPG that's ever existed on this green earth. So,
Dang.
and that's
Maybe not.
Well, I got
maybe
some
not-
catching up to do with that.
He
Not
owns them,
every
but
single
he hasn't had time to play them all quite yet.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. I mean, Quartet's not officially out yet, so he hasn't played that.
I tried not to, but they made me.
Is this any of your full-time jobs also, or is this like a side project for everybody?
I mean, it's a side project because it's not paid, but I am a full-time game developer.
Okay. Do you work on anything else that we may know about that you can talk about?
Yeah, I think I'm allowed to say what I work on now. I work on My Familiar, The Forge of the Fae. These are all upcoming JRPGs. And Threads of Time. And I just finished a project for Atari called Lunar Lander Beyond, which I was the writer for. That's the only non-JRPG I was working on.
When can we expect any of those? Like, what systems are they going to come out on?
Lunar Lander Beyond does not have a release date. They haven't even told me, and I've been asking because I'm like, come on, guys, I need that credit.
Right.
So I have no idea, but not in the next few months, I don't think. And Quartet of all the other ones, Quartet will probably be the first to come out. Actually, probably next year, Q1, Q2, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that myself. So nobody just wakes up and decides to make a game, obviously. Obviously, I assume all of you grew up playing games. So were there any specific works, either in like games or anime or other media, that inspired your ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I have a very incredibly common basic JRPG entrance story, which was FF7 was my entry point. And then from there, I kind of went backwards and played all the SNES and many of the NES ones. Because I just didn't know games with stories were a thing. I played a lot of video games as a kid. My older siblings, who grew up in the early 80s had a Nintendo Entertainment System. They played the original Mario. I was old enough to play Mario 3. I loved those games. I had a Sega. I'd play Sonic. So I played a lot of video games, but when I played FF7, I was like, wait, you can tell a story in a game? Like this is like a story, and it's got like pacing and characters, and I was immediately hooked. And I remember also I saw my neighbor. He was not much older than me, but I'd go over to his house just to watch him play Super Nintendo. He was playing FF6, and I remember just seeing it on the television screen, and it just like spoke to me on such a deep level. Like I knew like I had to play that one day, and then I did and loved it. And from there went to Chrono Trigger and Super Mario RPG, and then anything Square released in the late '90s I played. Well, yeah, I mean that was basically my story. And then I got I played trumpet in the band, and I went to music school and was a professional musician. And I remember writing. Like my senior year of college or junior year, I wrote on the wall, like on my little notepad, I said, I want to write music for games. I just wrote it down. I didn't know how I was going to do it because I didn't know, like, that was not really a thing people did. Like, there are obviously the people who work for the big studios, but it wasn't like now where there's like a million, younger people who are getting into indie games or whatever. I just knew I wanted to do it at some point. And then when in 2013, I started Something Classic with another friend of ours, Josh Garlitz. That sort of was my path. So yeah, it was this like collision of like playing Final Fantasy, doing music, and like wanting to put those two together somehow.
Gotcha. I actually grew up playing saxophone in the band myself.
Nice.
Did not go on to be a professional though, unfortunately.
Yeah, Pat, you played an instrument too. I know. I played the clarinet, right?
Yeah, I played trumpet as well. I play guitar and piano and trumpet all badly.
Very nice. Got a nice little group of musicians here.
Yeah.
So what about the rest of you? How did you decide that this is what you wanted to do?
Well, I was 9 and I played in 1994, and I played Secret of Mana on my neighbor down the street, his SNES, and I saw like the opening. Like I think first he told me like he's like, well, I was really bad at video games, and I still am. I'm pretty bad at action video games. But he told me like, oh, there's this game, and if you kill a bunch of enemies, you get more powerful. But then you don't lose that power. Like you would lose a power up if you played like Turtles in Time or something like that, or Super Mario, and like those power ups they went away. But these power ups they don't go away. You kill a bunch of enemies, you just stay that strong. And I was like, that's interesting. All right, this is describing a level up. And then he showed me Secret of Mana, and then like I saw the opening crawl, and I was just like that. I was 9, and I was like, this is what I want to do with my entire life. And that pretty much never changed, which is a little
Very
crazy. Cool. And so I took Japanese in college. I went to Japan for a semester to try and figure out because I remember when playing Secret of Mana, I was just like the same thing. I remember when I saw Dragon Ball Z for the first time. Like if you remember back in like 1995 when that came on television, like broadcast television, it was like it came from another planet. It was just like where did it like this is nothing like anything that we've ever experienced over here in the West. Like think about comparing this to DuckTales. Or comparing, Secret of Mana to like, I don't know, any game you'd have over here was just so different. And I was just like, how could this exist? Where does this come from? And so I spent, the next, 15 or so years trying to figure that out. And then after I answered that question, I started writing my book series to try and answer the question of like, how are classic, all-time revered games made? And so I spent then another 8 years answering that question. And then after 23 years of underemployment, that's an exaggeration, but I had a lot of stern looks from my wife, I finally became a game developer. And I made it a career when I was
that's awesome. That's a great story.
32.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Colonel Sanders was like 60 when he discovered his recipe, so never too late.
That's who my inspiration is, Colonel Sanders.
We're trying to get the license for the Colonel Sanders JRPG, but
they did. Hey, they
give
did
a
a
secret
graphic.
character.
Wait, they did one?
Yeah, they did a KFC visual novel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they had the dating sim. I forget what it was called, but it was.
I love you, Colonel Sanders.
I mean, it wasn't.
Was
a
it literally
turn-based
just
RPG,
called that? Nah, that was I think that was like a Valentine's or April Fool's joke, but it was so funny. But yeah, that's a great story. You mentioned Dragon Ball Z. Actually, like me personally, my first anime was Pokemon, and like I did have the same reaction. I was not born until 92, so I was not allowed to watch Dragon Ball Z in 95 when it came out because I was like 3. But
it's good for you. Build strong bones.
Yeah, right. when I watched Pokemon for the first time, though, I definitely had like a similar experience. Like I just was immediately sucked in, and Pokemon was designed to suck us in, but that's an entirely different discussion. But yeah, it's wild just how like that type of media can drag us down. It was so cool. Back to Quartet though. How long have you guys how long has the idea existed, and how long has this been in development?
Well, I think like Pat sort of mentioned earlier, our first game I worked on was Shadows of Adam, which came out in February of 2017, and then I don't think we probably started. Pat and I started like really developing concepts for Quartet maybe until that summer of 2017.
Yeah, like June. Yeah.
And maybe Pete would know exactly when we actually started making real progress. I think we started really making progress when Tyler, Darren, and Pete joined in, which was
I think 2020. Was it?
That sounds about right. Yeah, I mean, there was just a lot of like hurdles for Pat and I to kind of jump over. Like, honestly, we were putting kind of some of our own money, and we were hiring like a contract programmer, and we were trying to go to Unity, and like Pat and I, Pat specifically is really good at planning. So like we had this like everything on lock and key, like the planning, the vision for the game. We had really spent a lot of time really fleshing out what we wanted to do, so that could be kind of our guiding star. But we just didn't have money. We needed an art director. We needed someone who could do programming because Pat and I, neither of us can program. And so getting Ty and Pete on board was just huge.
If you're not a programmer and not an artist, you're going to have a hard time starting an RPG.
Yeah, you kind of need everything for that, don't you? Yeah. I realized I missed Pete. I want to circle back to past question. How did you get involved in this and decided this is what you wanted to do, Pete?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So my mom was a librarian, and she read voracious consumer of books, read lots and lots of fantasy novels. So, but when I was 6, she worked in the library at a public school library, and they got a book for like programming in BASIC on the Commodore. And like, that's not really a book you can put on the shelves in an elementary school library because nobody's got a Commodore. So she brought it home, and we had one. So I just started like programming on it, like copying the code into the computer and running it and seeing what it did. I visited my cousins. They had an NES, and I was obsessed with Mario, even though we didn't have an NES. So we came home and like we would draw Mario on cardboard boxes and pretend that we were playing it. Like we'd make little cardboard controllers, and it was really lame, but then I started learning programming, and so I would see these experiences and these games, and there were some other games on the computer, and I try to recreate them, and that's really just kind of been a theme through like my childhood and into adulthood. It was like I'd play a game, and then I'd be like, well, how did they actually do this? And I was constantly, every game I played, like, how did they actually do this? Like, and Final Fantasy VII for the first time, a game in like an RPG in full 3D, like blew me away, and that I remember just racking my brain for hours and days just thinking about how they did that with the models and the drawn backgrounds. And yeah, no, I've just been obsessed with programming and gaming since I was a kid. The fantasy and anime stuff. We used to wake up early in the morning. We didn't have anime on TV until Pokemon, but before then, we would get a couple of channels from the Bay Area before sunrise. And so we'd watch Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z before the sun came up. We'd set our alarm for like 5 a.m.
That's awesome.
But yeah, fantasy novels. I like, a lot of comedy stuff. My mom gave me the Piers Anthony books, and I really like these games with like a series, like where you meet the characters and you get to keep playing with them, and it really just drawn to JRPGs as a result of just kind of all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said you did it as more of a hobby before you started working with these guys, or am I wrong about that?
Yeah. So I mean, like I'm a programmer. I work in big tech. I live in the Bay Area, so. But like I do game dev for fun on the side. So gotcha. it's that's always been kind of more of a hobby for me, just growing up and even now. And I'm looking forward to releasing my first game. It'll be really exciting.
Awesome. I'm excited for all of you.
Pete, that's a great
this
story,
question,
man.
Yeah, like
that's a very heartwarming
the cardboard story. Mario. Oh man, you never told us that one.
That's so great. That's like that's not silly. That's wonderful.
Luckily,
that's definitely not silly at all. Like we all used to do stuff like that. I'm sure.
Yeah.
And luckily, I didn't get sued by Nintendo.
Yeah.
You would today.
Oh my god.
How exactly did that work though? I am curious. Like how did Cardboard Mario like function?
It was a cardboard box. We got like printer paper or like and we would like tape the levels on it, and then and just like pretend like we drew all like Goombas, and like they couldn't move or anything.
Okay.
And I'd get like a pencil and like kind of draw like where Mario was and kind of like make him jump by moving your arm. It was very low tech.
Low tech was always the best though. Like using your imagination back then, that was so much fun.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
The other game that we
That's
liked
awesome.
was like a turn-based war game where each person would take a turn drawing like a tank or a, silly.
That's great.
So this question was partially asked by Callum Stevens on RPG Sanctuary. What is it like to work on an RPG? Like how do you develop, what part comes first? Like, do you develop the story? Do you pick like a gameplay system you want to go? Do you just draw something and be like, I'm going to build a world out of this?
Yeah.
We did a little bit of everything.
Yeah. I feel like that's kind of like similar to a question people ask composers, like what comes first, melody or chords? It just depends, right? I mean, what did we do first, Pat? We kind of came up with the story hook first, right?
Yeah, we came up with like a concept. So you had like Tyler had this concept of like this little RPG Maker game called Channel Changer, where it was like 4 different stories in 4 different genres, and it was like a comedy thing. It's like you would flip the channel, and it was like you could just warp between these chibi channel versions of reality. And then so we took that and made it more serious. And I have been reading like a lot about Napoleon and like the history of like Europe from like 1800 to 1945, and I was just really interested in the question of like how does like having historical consequences. If you think about, I mean, this is pretty far. Like we're going from RPG Maker 4 Channel Changer game to what are the historical consequences of the Napoleonic Wars and how did it result in the Second World War? But that's the sort of thing that interested me, and so we just smashed these very different things together, and that was our first. That was like the hook, the concept, the 4 stories.
Right. And there was a little bit of a gameplay idea before. I knew the only gameplay idea I really had was I knew, like we had with SOA, we had a pretty simple but solid enough battle system that people seemed to like, and the feedback was good on it. Was with like kind of the regenerating 8 people, and I said, let's just, since we're gonna have 8 characters, let's just make an FF10 kind of thing where at any point someone can switch places with someone in the back row and instantly give that person their turn. That was like really the only gameplay mechanic that I pitched. There was, maybe in a future game there'll be more complex mechanics, but I think that's about it. Maybe I'm forgetting something.
Tyler, you also worked on Pillars of Dust, didn't you?
So Pillars of Dust was actually done by a sister studio, Josh Garlitz, who worked with me on Shadows of Adam, formed his own studio called Retro Games, and they've produced 2 games, Pillars of Dust and For a Fast Future. Do you want?
Okay.
Sorry, Pete, did you have something you were about to say?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add on to the whole like making what goes into making a game, and with this genre at least, like you're not making one game, right? Like you're actually making 3 games. One is like exploration, right, on the map, and like opening chests and solving puzzles, and like what tech do you need for that? And then there's another game which is like the battle system. And you switch between these 2 games, and then there's kind of a third one which is like the menu system, which you don't really think of like going through menus as a game, but like when you're talking about the complexity and what goes into making things, like there is a ton. And like what's your equipment, what's your spells, can you cast spells, can you use items, like can you change your party formation, is there settings, can you save and load your game? Like there's just a lot it's really easy to underestimate the complexity of a game if you gloss over the user interfaces. But it's like a good third of the game.
Are you saying that you
brought up
underestimated
menus?
Yes.
I'm glad you brought up menus actually, because like in a lot of RPGs, I'll spend like a ton of time just like theory crafting, like going through and just doing different builds of all my characters, trying to figure out what works. So yeah, I've never really thought of it as like separate games, but when you put it that way, yeah, you're kind of right.
Yeah, on the technical side, they're just completely different. What your goals are and what you're building. But yeah, no, it's really fun to watch people play demos, and like they'll launch the game and then they'll just go to the menus and just spend 10 minutes looking at everything and forget like not walking around, not talking to people, not fighting monsters, just like, all right, let's see what's in these menus.
That is something we like to do as RPG players, isn't it? That's like, I always love just seeing what a menu is all about.
I've definitely done that before.
Well, any PC player, they're going straight to the menu and they're adjusting the settings to their liking.
Oh yeah, turn off that bloom, turn off that depth of field.
Yeah, turn off motion blur.
Yeah, oh yeah, I hate that stuff.
Yep. Final Fantasy 16. Oh, it's killing me.
Octopath.
Yeah, that too. So kind of in the same vein, like when developing a character chapter, I assume it kind of is the same. Like it's just which came first, the chicken or the egg. Depends on who you ask. Like, do you think of the character first, and you're like, I want to build a story of like a rogue monk who used to be a bard and something, and he's trying to like perform penance for the atrocities he committed as a bard? Or do you think of like a story and you're like, what kind of character would like fit this story?
Yeah, we came up with the characters first, so like we had like 4 ideas for the story. So like the original concept is like one of the stories is a western, and one of the stories is a comedy, and one of the stories takes place in something very like real life, and one of the stories is a post-apocalypse. And we didn't end up taking those super literally, but we did use each concept. So like so we created the characters. Like Cordelia is this, you know, classic snooty black mage who goes out west, which is actually east in her world, but it becomes a western. You see her chapter, it becomes a western, and she's providing law in a desert, lawless land. And then Ben is the comedy one. He's this he's Pete's avatar in Discord. He's the overweight middle-aged cook, and you know, he's adventure is thrust upon him unwillingly. He's not really into it, but he's like, well, I guess I gotta pay the rent. And and so like he's the comedy character. Then there's the sort of real life, similar to real life. That's Alexandra, who lives in something sort of similar to mid 1950s Paris. Okay. So it's not like, you know, it's very similar to a modern person's real life. And then for the post-apocalypse, there's really only one section of Nikolai's chapter that is post-apocalyptic in this destroyed city, because the post-apocalypse couldn't really support a story in this venue for the entire time. But yeah, so we had
time travel was involved.
Yeah. So we didn't really we tried not to get too convoluted. There is a twist in the setting, but it's like it's more about why the twist happened than what the twist is and all the many myriad crazy things that happened. And so we come up with the 4 scenarios and the 4 characters that went into them. So the comedy guy is obviously a fish out of water. The post-apocalypse is a military guy, because who else would be wandering around in post-apocalypse? And the modern day character Alexandra is she runs a shop. She's a shop girl. Like she just has a very ordinary, tame existence. And I'm waving my hands around as I explain these things. Nobody can see me. I don't know why I'm doing that, but
it's okay. But I talk with my hands too.
Yeah. So we basically came up with those characters and the premises really close together. And then after each character, we came up with a foil for each character. So like in Ben's chapter, the most obvious foil is Agatha, who is a very serious soldier, sort of like city guard, almost like magic police type of character, who's the opposite of Ben, who is this very fly by the seat of your pants, unwitting adventurer. And we did that for each character. They had the foil. And that was it. That was the cast right there. And we also thought about all the roles. Tyler can tell you some of the cool things we did with the roles.
Yeah, I guess in gameplay, you know, just each character sort of had a specific gameplay hook. I mean, I think a lot of like when you make decisions, it's sort of like products of just like having really big macro ideas about what your game's vision is. Things like fall into place because it makes sense. So like, for instance, we said, okay, we want a game with a lot of characters. And it's 4 stories. So like Pat said, if there are 4 stories, but there are 8 characters, well, then there's a main character in each story, and then there has to be a foil for contrast purposes. But if there's 8 characters and you have a battle where you want people to swap in and out characters, well, then if everyone could do the same thing, then there's no incentive to swap them. So then by thus, we said, well, okay, each character is going to have like a niche in combat, because that makes sense for the gameplay, but it also makes sense for the story. Like Pat already mentioned, like Cordelia. Like if Cordelia was a tank or like a melee DPS, it just would have so much dissonance with her story, her story is she's a very academically trained mage. And so like a lot of these decisions just sort of like fall together like just because that's the only real thing that makes sense. And I think that's really credit to Pat's like really good big picture planning. Of course, there's little things you got to figure out, tweaks here and there. But I would say I don't think any of the characters' archetypes has changed since the basic vision. There's been a few tweaks around the edges with their stats, maybe a few adjustments to their skills, but for the most part, they've basically been what they were as we planned it, 4 years ago.
So gameplay, they've remained the characters that you created.
Right.
Basically.
It's there's a flavor of game for everyone, and I know I think Pat or Pete might be with me in the sense I like when a character who they are in combat really relates to who they are in the story. Like I know Pete's a big fan of FF4.
FF4, Trails, all those games, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that really feels like really synergistic and feels really satisfying to me. But I mean, I also love crunchy job systems and heavily customization. I mean, FF5 is one of my favorite games. I like the Octopath Traveler games. But sometimes like in a game like FF7, for instance, a game I really love, Materia can basically make everyone do anything, and so there's no real incentive to bring other characters in your party other than just preference for what they look like or their story or whatever. So we definitely didn't want to do that.
Right. It's definitely good to have a diversity because when I played Octopath Traveler, my biggest complaint was that you're basically picking like one side of the same coin for like two of the characters because they were basically the same thing, just different type of flavor. And I didn't really like that. But from what I've played of your guys so far, like each character feels unique, even the temporary characters, which I have to really compliment. That is not something you see thought put into usually. Like when two cops joined me on Ben's story, I was fully expecting just Biggs and Wedge, and they were to a degree, but they actually had like individual abilities that weren't just the same twice.
Right. I think a big part of that, like, I remember I worked at Disneyland one summer and they taught you about theming well. Like, if you know kind of what it is, like if you know you're in Futureland, but you have to have a trash can in Futureland, then it's going to look futuristic, right? So like things just sort of, and Pat, actually Pete too, with the titles, like we say, okay, this cop's going to have a DPS move, and then we just like theme it in a clever way to make it feel really distinct and unique to what a cop would have. So I don't know. Let's do a little, give us a skill, a type of RPG skill. Like how about a single target? Here's an easy one. Here's an easy one for Pete. A single target stun move that a cop would have. What would you call it, Pete?
I mean, like stun gun.
Or taser.
Yeah, taser.
Handcuffs.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
So I mean, if you really broke it down, all our guest characters probably have like the most basic archetypes of skills. But I'm not taking away from your comment. I really accept it. I think I really appreciate that. But I think like just like that theming, it makes it feel so much more individualized, I think. And actually it's really fun. Like sometimes we'll be like, oh, we need like a wind move that does slow down, and then we'll just like have a brainstorming session where we'll just like generate as many puns as we can. It's kind of fun.
I'm a sucker for a good pun also. Heck, I'm a sucker for a bad pun, so like the worse the better for me. So
we do a lot of them for the enemy attacks. Like those are really fun. My favorite, the one I came up with, it's my claim to fame, is there's a giant tree monster you fight in Ben's chapter, and it has a melee attack called Birch Slap.
I did see that. I did see that. That was very
classic.
Ben's entire chapter was really funny.
There's just another part to that. Actually, this is the technical side. Is that our tools are really good. Like Pete spent a lot of time making our tools. We spent a lot of time designing them. But Pete connected it all together, made the magic actually function. And so we have like really robust content tools that like can do virtually anything that a JRPG could do. So like, I had written those 3 books about JRPGs. And so like, I really had a really good grasp of like, what are all the aspects of like a buff, a debuff, an attack? Like what are all of the things? Like I had sat and read the API of everything that exists in Final Fantasy, like and how every single enemy used every single attack, what do they all do, and how's the behavior work? And so we created like all these templates for attacks, buffs, debuffs, enemy AI, and so it's really plug and play. And Tyler, I have to say, with his deep knowledge of JRPGs, really polished that system out. I did like the highfalutin conceptual work, and then he did the nitty gritty, actually making it function with Pete. And then so now we can make an attack like that in 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was great. Pat had written like this big GDD with like all the formulas and all the, the fields, and like it was just really easy to work off of that.
Yeah, and
So-
I'm really smart too.
Do you have like a tool that basically you can go in and set like elemental type, damage range,
Yep.
attack, or
Yep.
sub? Yeah,
Oh yeah, we
that's
have it
that's
all.
a really great idea.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead, Pete.
I was gonna say there's an application called Artisy, and one of the features it has is kind of this like database system. So if you used RPG Maker before, like there's a database tool in there, and like you can set up all the enemies and all the attacks and the abilities and the gear and stuff like that. And so Artisy is kind of like a standalone application that lets you organize your data and add whatever fields you want, and drop downs and checkboxes, and it'll export to Unity so that you can or JSON or other programmer things. But it'll export this database to Unity, so you can just call it from your code, and whenever you make changes, you use this like other tool, and then you re-export, and then you just load it in Unity, and you have new skills, new weapons, whatever.
That's really cool. You do use RPG Maker at least partially.
No, we got some ideas from there, but our stuff is a little bit more powerful in certain ways. Some ways it's not
Gotcha.
like persistence; it's not as powerful because we didn't want to do that in Unity. But
I think like as a tool for learning, like RPG Maker is great. Like if you want to make an RPG, like get RPG Maker. Like
Agreed.
that's like you can do like level design, you can learn how to do logic through their eventing systems, and it just makes it really easy. It won't look the most original, like if you're using all the out of the box stuff, but you will learn a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's where when Pat was saying earlier, like my experience with JRPGs, most of the stuff I wanted to see in Artisy was just stuff I just saw in RPG Maker 20 years ago, because that was kind of like a genesis of something Glass. I don't need to go into that story, but we were all part of the RPG Maker community. And like Pete said, like RPG Maker is a great tool. I mean, obviously there are great games made in it, but just like for learning, like if you say, I don't know how to make art, I don't know how to code, get RPG Maker and just start pressing. You could learn a lot of skills. Like our map designer like came from the RPG Maker community. He's really excellent at that. And it's a great tool for making
great.
specifically Japanese style RPGs. It's really great.
I was saying, yeah, and you can learn like how to do layouts. We don't use RPG Maker to make our maps. We use Tiled. It's another open source tool. But yeah, like he was, he's from the community and he has a lot of experience there, and he was able to take all of that knowledge and all that skill over, and he's made a lot of really fantastic maps for us.
Yeah, my only experience with RPG Maker was my old college roommate made a 2D version of Knuckles Treasure Hunt, like the game from Sonic Adventure 2, and he basically just made it 2D. That's like the only time is that I like bug fixed it for him a little bit, but yeah, it's a great tool, definitely robust.
Oh, making insane mini games in RPG Maker is a hobby of a lot of ours.
That's good. Mini games are always like so much fun. Like I always wonder, just in general, and like tell me if this is true for you guys, because I'm curious now. Anytime I see like a mini game in an RPG or just a game in general, like Final Fantasy VII, you guys know how many mini games there are in that. I just wonder if there was like somebody on the dev team who made like this short little game, or just had this idea and they're like, yeah, throw it in there, we'll find a place for it.
I mean, so like actually that's an interesting question, because one of the things on my most recent playthrough of Final Fantasy VII that I noticed is that the way they use mini games, and I should break down that into two categories, but the way they use mini games really reinforces the story. So like, if you think of Final Fantasy as always being story first, right? Or at least Final Fantasies before, I don't know, 13, I don't know. I don't know when
Or
Final
less.
Fantasy lost its way a little bit and started being something different. And if people like that, that's fine. I'm not trying to tell anybody that the latter day Final Fantasies should not be liked. They just are very different than the thing that we are imitating. But the mini games are like the one where you have to wave, like you're in Shinra Tower, you have to wave your friends over between the statues to hide from the guards, or the one where you have to, run in place on the Gaia cliffs to warm yourself up, or the one where you have to dash through the wind walls in the northern crater as the barriers are forming, so that you'll get knocked back. The point of all those mini games was to tell a story. Same with the parade mini game, right? It's not about
Don't forget Rufus.
It's to make you feel the story through the gameplay. And so even the bike chase, I mean, snowboarding, I don't know what they were doing. I think with the snowboarding and the submarines, I think they got some money. I think they got some money from Sony to show off 3D tech, and so I think they had to agree to make some 3D mini games to show off that tech. I think
nobody can bat 1,000.
Yeah, so somebody was paying them to do that. So I mean, if you got to pay the bills too, you got to keep the lights on. So
yeah, I mean, speaking of being paid to make mini games, like we do, that was 2 of our backer rewards. So we like to that end, like yes, like occasionally we have like, hey, can you put this in the game? And like we are, kind of have to do that to an extent as well. But they will all be themed, just like Pat said, like. Gotcha. To the story and in universe. They won't just be some like random like let's play rock paper scissors. Like no, it's
yeah. I think that's what most mini game makers failed to notice about Final Fantasy VII's mini games is that they made you feel the plot through your thumbs, and people didn't really get that with their imitators.
Did you have when dealing with any of the backers, like they had just such an unreasonable request that you're like, we want to fulfill it because you paid for this, but absolutely not?
I think it was more they had a little bit of unknowing requests, and so it was like some of the requests had like HP, like certain HP values, which is like, well, we'll make it like a beefy enemy.
Oh, like for their monster, yeah.
Yeah. Like so, like that.
Right.
It was just like they didn't have context, but we interpreted their request.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they're like, I give like a specific HP value. It's like, okay, so you just want a tanky enemy. Okay. Got it.
All of our backers are amazing, smart, beautiful people.
It's true.
Including me?
Oh, yeah. Especially.
Very nice.
Our Kickstarter backers have been incredible.
That's good.
I bet a few in the wild, too.
Anybody. Yeah, like I've never really heard any stories of like people dealing with their Kickstarter backers, and I've always like made jokes with my friends just like, man, I wonder like if there's any horror stories of like just dealing with an unreasonable backer or something like that. But that's really good to hear that it's like not a chore.
Yeah, I guess we have the good ones.
Yeah,
I have been an unreasonable backer before. So I was somebody like it was. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but they were asking for like a joke or like some kind of in-game text, and like I did a joke that referenced some like copyrighted thing, and they're like, "Yeah, we can't do that." I'm like, fine.
Well, that doesn't sound unreasonable unless you like, yeah. But
I'm exaggerating. Yeah, it wasn't bad. They just said pick something else, and I did. I'm like, okay,
right. Yeah, working with your backers, I assume, is like just a necessary part of the game, especially when you have to go the Kickstarter route.
Yeah. I think we've been pretty lucky. I think sometimes, like I've heard stories from other devs of like somebody getting really stubborn about a thing, and then
Well, too bad we don't have any stories like this on this episode.
No, it's been great.
Yeah, but really like, speaking of Kickstarter, the demo, you launched that in February, right? For the backers?
Yeah, that sounds right. February.
Yeah.
Or what's the month after February? March. One of those months.
Months are hard.
Time is meaningless.
I almost said June. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, you need some sleep probably. I played it twice. Once when it first came out, and then once 2 days ago because I wanted to refresh my memory because I have the memory of like an ant. So like, because I've also played Shadows of Adam, and I wanted to talk about that a little more. And then when I started writing questions, I was like, oh my god, I don't remember that game. Like, I remember playing it and loving it. I just don't remember a thing about it. I was just like re-impressed with the game because it's so well crafted from the 2 chapters I played. I didn't have a chance to play chapter 8 yet because I know that was updated later on Steam. And are you guys planning to release another demo to backers before the main launch? Because Q1 2024 is not that far away. Or are you just gonna make us like wait until the final product drops?
I think we had talked about for backers, for all backers, maybe doing once we finish Alex's chapter. So all 4 of the prologue chapters would be done. We could release a demo for that. Past that, probably not. There are people who backed at beta tiers, so we want to honor that by keeping a full beta of the game exclusive to those people. But I'm definitely fine, and I think the rest of you guys are, I don't want to speak for them, of like, doing like a 4 prologue chapter and doing it through like a beta branch on our Steam build or something, so backers could enjoy that early and give us feedback and check it out.
And that was not meant to come off as where's a new demo because I'm a backer and entitled.
Well, you know what? The release date just got pushed to 2027. Thanks a lot for asking.
Damn it. But yeah, one of the things I did notice, and Tyler, this is a compliment to you, when I played the demo, you did have a very good focus on music and sound design. Like everything was memorable. It didn't sound like generic. And that's something that I give a lot of flack for a lot of games in general lately, is that music just doesn't sound memorable anymore because they put it so atmospheric and in the background and you don't even really hear it. But I can tell, and given that I know now that all three of you are musicians, it's important to you.
I mean, I'm a genius, so that's the first part. No, I'm
yeah.
joking. Thank you for that. No, I just try to write music that I think sounds good, and I definitely probably play Quartet a little harder. I just definitely go for it a little bit more than some other games where sometimes the gig is just to write atmospheric music or music that isn't as noticed. I'm afforded to be working with a great team that's cool with me, kind of stretching a little bit and trying to write some cool stuff. So I appreciate the compliment.
Yeah.
I think my main contributions to music are to come up with fun titles and complain about the English horn samples.
Did you have a tier on Kickstarter? I'm sure you did. That includes the digital stack.
Yeah, I believe so. So I think it actually wasn't even priced that much higher than the base tier. So probably most folks will get a copy of that when it's done. And I was actually looking at, because I was trying to make a list of what I needed to write to finish the soundtrack, and I think there's maybe 10 more tunes or so. And I'm up to 70 tracks in the game, so kind of crazy how much music there is in this game.
You're gonna go hard like the end of Final Fantasy VI and write a 12 piece movement for the final boss.
I'm already tired thinking about that. Maybe, probably, yeah, I probably will. But yeah, I will say, yeah, Pete and Pat both have pretty much supplied all the titles for the songs. 'Cause when I write game music, I don't really care about titles. I think I might have titled one or two of the songs, but there was one that it was music that plays in Cordelia's chapter when you're fighting on the train. It's a single map tune. So of course I have me playing live trumpet and a live percussionist and guitar overdubs, and I just me whistling. It's just way too hard for a song you hear for 3 minutes. But anyway, I just asked the team to give me a title. I said, give me the most JRPG-esque title for this train music, and Pete came up with what was it, Black Powder Sunset.
Ooh, that's a cool name.
so dumb but awesome.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
It's
actually,
so great. It's such a great title.
You actually answered my next question as well. I was going to ask, it sounded like it was live music. I was going to ask if you did do recording or if you were using a music maker.
Yeah, there's a mix of a little bit of everything. It's kind of all over the place, but there's a lot of really talented live musicians that do a lot of the featured soloists, a lot of the wind parts, and I play trumpet, so I try to record that when I can. So yeah, we definitely try when we can afford it, and but it's a mix of samples, synthesizers and live instruments.
Well, if you ever need somebody to play Ocarina, hit me up, because I recently learned how to play it after I 3D printed one.
Oh, nice. Sick.
I always wondered what 3D printers were actually for, so thank you for...
Oh yeah, it's for making Pokemon that are on my desk, and for making ocarinas that I sell at maker markets for $10 a pop when they cost me $1 to make.
Nice.
That's basically it. Oh, and for printing benchies. But last thing about music that I wanted to ask, among the three of you, who are some of your favorite composers, video game or otherwise?
Well, I'm a big Uematsu and Mitsuda fan. Even Mitsuda's lesser known stuff like Seventh Seal. That's a really good one. Sailing to the World, that album is an absolute classic. Short, but man, what a hit. And then Mitsuda also has this, he has a soundtrack for a storybook that Masato Kato wrote, and it's called The 5 Seasons of Kirite, Kirite. And that's a banger too. So yeah, I'm a big fan of them. I'm trying to think anyone else. Yoko Shimomura's good. I certainly love one of Hiroki Kikuda's soundtracks, the Secret of Mana soundtrack. That's an absolute banger. End to end. He never really replicated that success, which is odd, but that's a great one. So yeah, those are my guys.
Yeah, pretty much same. Uematsu's probably my favorite just because of his huge versatile sound and strong melodic hooks. Mitsuda, one of my favorites. Yoko Shimomura, of course. Such a delightful composer, and she's actually extremely versatile too. I think she doesn't get credit for her extreme versatility. I love Yasunori Nishika's music.
He's been great.
His music of Nishiki, apologies. He's an incredible orchestrator. His music it's just breathtaking. The guy who wrote music for Grandia Iwadare, he's great. I like Kamauzu a little bit too. I've kind of grown to like his stuff more. And then outside of games, I'm really a jazz musician at heart. That's really my biggest love of music. So Thad Jones, all the arrangers for the Count Basie Orchestra, Maria Schneider. I mean, those are some of my all-time favorite composers of all time. I try to sneak that in whenever I can, when it's appropriate, in subtle ways and some not so subtle ways. But yeah, those are my
be as non-subtle as you want. Plug whatever the heck you think deserves attention right now.
Wait, I know the composers Pete likes.
Okay. So Mitsuda, obviously amazing. The Suikoden 4 soundtrack, the intro is done by the guy who plays the accordion, Koba. Just amazing. Mm-hmm. I love accordion. I'm a sucker. But the entire Falcom sound team, JDK, Jindo, Singa, Udasuga, just amazing stuff. I like hype music. Like, I don't know, it might be the ADHD or something. Like, I can't get enough, Dragon Force, speed metal, and just like in every Ys game, it's like, hey, let's leave our sleepy village and go to the first, field area, and then they just go hard for no reason. And
Level 3 slime.
Oh, so great! I love it. And like the Trails of Cold Steel games, absolutely amazing soundtracks. Falcom, Jindo, Singa, is great work from and everybody else. They have a bunch of composers, but they all do great stuff.
One of my friends on the topic of like music that has no business going as hard as it does, my friend Will loves to talk about the title theme for Pictionary on NES. Go listen to that if you haven't heard it. It just is unnecessarily awesome for a game about Pictionary.
I'm imagining what this sounds like now.
It's really good.
It's like going all angular, like fusion jazz.
Does it go harder than the Weather Channel theme from 1997?
It's like the JRPG boss theme.
Oh yeah,
it's on the same tier as the Weather Channel.
It's hard, man.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of times, I know this isn't your first game, you had Shadows of Adam. I did play Shadows of Adam and I loved it. But how different is Quartet from Shadows of Adam, and I guess Pillars of Dust as well, because you did work on that, in terms of both like development and gameplay? Like, did you take any ideas from either game that you liked as an idea and just wanted to improve it, or did you pretty much use entirely fresh ideas?
A little bit of both. I mean, I would say Quartet is definitely a little more character-centric and story-focused than SOA was. SOA certainly had characters and certainly had a story, but it was a little bit more cursory. The pacing was a little more breezier. Quartet's still a game that we really want to have good, strong pacing and like lots of momentum, but I would say that Quartet is very much a little more fleshed out with the characters and the story and the world building. Things we took from SOA, obviously, like a lot of the graphical style, a lot of the basic concepts for the battle system with the regenerating AP system, where your AP is capped at 100 and you get a little bit back after every turn. So we just took that wholesale from SOA because people liked it and we thought it was a cool system. And then but then I think working on SA was really great because that was like my first game ever as a commercial game developer, and I learned a lot during development and after development, things that worked, things that didn't, and a lot of it was just like, okay, how can I make the next game easier to make? Because there were a lot of just incredibly frustrating parts of making SOA, nothing to do with the people I was working with, but just like the tech and the limitations of the tech, and then getting towards the end of the game and be like, man, I really wish we had thought to do this, because I would have been nice if we could, like, there were just things like gear couldn't do in SOA. Like SOA's gear system was like pretty limited, so like we were like designing in-game gear, and like we had no levers to pull. It was just like, well, this one just has more stats. That was it. There was no like this could do this or this. And so when Pat and I sat down, we were like, we need to make a system that can like do anything we can think of, and we like try to think of everything. Like, and I think that's one way to definitely improve from SOA. I couldn't speak too much about Pillars of Dust because I wasn't directly involved with it, and that game's scope was definitely a lot more smaller and it's more comedic. But I think maybe the one thing all the SC and SC adjacent games have in common is they're like unapologetically in the spirit of sort of the retro games with like modern quality life and such. But I think the real thing is like all of us like we love slow burn games, but I think we really like want a game with like really good pacing. Like that's really important to us. It's important to me at least. Anyone else have any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like we wanted to apply we wanted to make games more rationally based on the lessons of like Final Fantasy, and so we like, okay, so like what did Final Fantasy do that was janky, and we tried to streamline like everything. This is the technical. We need to know much about it, but we tried to like use normalization functions, which are just like saying like IQ is a normalization function, is like 100 is average, and 110 is 10% higher than average. And we did that for all the stats, because Final Fantasy stats are like normalized around 255. So like that was just like, that was the way we wanted to do things. Just the smoothest, buttery production line, like the ultimate ration. Like we were not, and we didn't accomplish that all the time. Sometimes there's craziness, but we really wanted to like take all like the inspiration from these 5 games we did and like execute those in a way that's much more clear-sighted, because they were doing it for the first time. No one had ever done half the things that they had done before. And so we're like, oh, but we get to benefit from their work, and you're gonna have everything be like this, just like the smoothest possible runway to getting towards a very similar goal. So yeah, I don't know. That's always been the ethos of the project, I think.
You mentioned quality of life, and that is something that I definitely noticed, at least in terms of encounters, because all of the encounters, at least that I ran into, I don't know if you plan to pivot this at any time later in the game, you can see them all. There's no random encounters, which I personally love because I hate grinding nowadays. I don't have time for it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that's a trick. Once the game registers that you've paid for it, all those switch to random encounters.
Oof.
And you have to pay to turn them off.
Yeah, one thing I love about random encounters is that, or one thing I hate about random encounters is that they really punish you for backtracking. Mm-hmm. So like, oops, I took the wrong fork in the road. Like, guess what? Now you got to fight 3 more monsters to find like a chest with a potion in it. Like, good job.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That could be actually a really funny anti-piracy measure where if you pirate the game and you detect it, there's no fixed encounters. They're all random and they're all like absurdly hard.
That's going in. Write it on the list, guys.
New game minus. We have a list
You're
of
welcome.
all the things we're adding in new game minus.
Yeah, the closer it's like our joke mode. The closer you get to a treasure chest, the higher random encounters get.
Oh god, it always feels like that, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
And every
That's
chest
like...
in the game only contains a potion. and a note promising that the next chest is better.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's one of the things that everybody likes to say about Chrono Trigger is they're like, yeah, it's a good RPG because the pacing is great because there's no random encounters. You can, if you just do the encounters as you come across them, you'll be properly leveled, and that's pretty much true. And I didn't have difficulty beating any of the bosses. Like, they definitely gave me a run for my money. Like, I had to really think about healing and everything, but I wasn't like, man, I'm under leveled, I need to go grind some. They were all like really well balanced, so like it feels like you guys nailed that in this as well.
Yeah, that's one of Tyler's favorite games. I know he replays it once a year. So,
Oh, Chrono Trigger. Yeah, it's a very curated experience, and I feel like as a small team with limited resources, that seems like the kind of game we could more realistically do. Though I have been thinking a lot, like, you know, like that's just the kind of way I like to balance and like think about my games, is like the gated encounters sort of like kind of get you in the right spot so that when you get to a boss, like you have everything you need to beat them. You might have a little extra if you did some exploring or whatever, and or geared up differently, but for the most part you'll kind of be around the same area, and then I kind of like curate an experience that feels right and thrilling and exciting and challenging, but ultimately winnable and not frustrating.
Yeah.
That's sort of like my view on that. But maybe in a future game, explore more open, kind of grindy or like customizable characters that could be a little more interesting and challenging for me to.
Yeah,
develop.
I mean, Tyler and I talked a lot about this in the pre-production stage, the elaborate, immense pre-production stage. But like, basically, what we wanted to do is change the circle of affordances, which is just like things that you could do. Like with every dungeon, you should, like, instead of having to grind and engage with the systems that way, we just like to open up a new skill or a new item that modifies your skills or give you a new character. That's why we have all these guest characters. How many guest characters do we end up having? A lot. I'll count in a sec after I finish this thought. But basic idea is like you should be getting new qualitative things to play with and not just worrying about your quantitative growth, because that's how games get boring. It's like, well, in 3 levels, I'll be this much more powerful than this person. We want some of the unexpected, some of the qualitative changes, like, oh, I got this new ability, and it really changes the entire way I approach battles. And like having combinations of characters also does that, and so that's really how we wanted to design it. Instead of having grinding, it's like, your options grow more numerous instead of your options get linearly more powerful.
Right. And like that there's like a place for that, perhaps, like that people could like that, where they want to just get the stronger fire spell or whatever. But that was definitely a thing where you identified even as early as SOA's development that we didn't want to do. We definitely wanted, like Pat said, to be qualitatively different. I think the Trills games do a really good job of that too. And Pete probably knows way more about it than I do. But every time I like research the game, I'm like always impressed with like how robust the skill systems are.
Yeah, they might they might go too hard on like too many systems and too like there's so many different kinds of equipment and loadout changing things that you can do, and but yeah, no, it's like I think that's too. I think we're in a nice, like, happy middle ground, but we'll see what the players think.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at personally, is like I'm 30, so my free time is very limited compared to when I was like 12 and had no money but all the free time in the world. So my time is valuable to me. I don't want to grind. I don't want to have to figure out like a million complex systems. Like, I want to be able to like read what's going on, digest it, and then hopefully understand it, and then play the game. And I got to say, like, so far from what I played, you have nailed it. Like, it is a very accessible game.
Well, I love it when people praise us, so thank you.
I know, I just like this.
Just eat that up.
No, I mean, like, legitimately, I
have.
There was like one bug that I encountered in the demo where like 2 songs overlapped and it like sounded funny, but other than that, I'm just like, that's a bug fix. Like, I'm genuinely enjoying this game, and like I want more. Like, that's the entire feeling that I have like had while like playing this game. And yeah, so like I'm very excited for this game to come out, and like for an RPG, I'm sure you guys can relate to this as RPG fans. My backlog is endless and just keeps on growing every time I discover like a new cool game that I want to try.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, for like one to jump pretty much to the top of my list, like the minute this game comes out, I'm playing it. Like, it says a lot.
Nice. And so, actually that bug you described, it's not a bug. It's actually like an experimental, like polytonal, like liggity sort of texture where I have 2 orchestras playing on the top.
You wouldn't.
No, I have like PTSD from. So did that happen on the old demo or the new demo, or?
It was the old demo. I didn't re-download the demo after
that should be fixed now.
Oh, thank God. Okay,
you're good. You're good, Pete. You're good, Pete. Now, that was like some old stuff that was
we
happening.
embraced middleware. We just embraced audio middleware, and that was that.
Oh, by the way,
it was like one of those things that I like blinked for a second because I'm just like, am I crazy or am I hearing like 2 themes at once?
No,
and then when it changes,
the lesson is just get the middleware. Just do it. Don't try and do it yourself. Just get the middleware.
Yeah, it helps. And
could you imagine like the chaos of like if every character has a theme, if they're all on screen, the themes just play simultaneously?
Oh gosh.
That'd be funny.
Yes, I will shamelessly plug the middleware. It's called Intro Loop. It's available on the Unity Asset Store.
That's great.
All right,
it's fantastic.
If they want to sponsor us to evangelize more, then you heard it here first.
So, Shadows of Adam had a release through Limited Run, and Limited Run is actually local to where I am. I'm from North Carolina, and they are like 20 minutes down the street from me. Like, I know pretty much everybody involved with Limited Run, at least at the retail store, and I've met Josh a couple times. Is that who you're going to be doing the physical version through Are you going to do it through limited run, or are you going to be
We encourage you to
self-publishing?
drive there and ask them.
I will get the same answer that I get every other time. I'm like, hey, you getting this game?
Yeah. All I will say is that doing a physical for SOA was hugely successful, and I love physical games, and I know a lot of fans of classic games especially love physical games. I know all of us would love to see Quartet come out physically. That's all I can say.
Well, for SOA, I can tell you in the retail store, the limited run retail store has like retro games as well as like backstock of their games. Shadows of Adam only has like one column left on the shelf, whereas a lot of other Switch games have like 6.
So I'll tell you what, man. So SO came out in 2017, and I can't remember when the limited run, maybe even 2020,
I think 2020, yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking, no one is going to buy this. Like, this game is long forgotten. It's a niche, like, little indie game that
My career is over. My
I didn't
family
think
doesn't love
that-
me anymore.
No, but I was just like, I mean, I had no risk. Like, they took up on all the risk to do it. I was like, sure, just do it. If you want to do it, like, that's fine. I was just like, why are they doing this? No one's going to buy this. And it sold very well in the first week. I was delighted. And so definitely, like, yeah, I would love for that to happen with Quartet. Definitely. I just like, we can't really talk about it more than that.
Yeah, the other thing you should be hearing is that there's only a few copies of the Shadows of Adam physical left, and you should go out and buy them immediately because you might miss out because that is a limited run.
Yeah. Or you just come to my house. I'm looking at my shelf right now, and I still have 4 PlayStation copies and 2
We said we were
Switches.
not going to talk about that.
Nice.
Oh, right. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, if you want to come to my... They just sent me 10, so if anyone wants one, just come to my house.
Yeah. I wouldn't invite the internet, but I think our listeners are relatively safe people. Is there anything else before we get to listener questions? Is there anything else that you guys want to say about the game that I haven't already brought up?
Yeah, I think. We haven't specifically said it, maybe implicitly, but when I mentioned that the Quartet has non-linear chapters that you can play anywhere, this game is not like Octopath in the sense that the characters don't talk to each other or the plots don't come together. This is like a straightforward, linear, plot-driven JRPG. Like, by the end of the game, all 8 characters are in the same plot. They're conversing. They're having conflicts. They're having relationships. So I just wanted to put that out there because that's a question we get often. Like, oh, I loved Octopath Traveler, but... And it's like the world's loudest but. So that definitely happens in Quartet. And in fact, if people want to see what that looks like, if you go on Steam right now and find our Steam page, you can play a demo, which is the Chapter 8 of the game, where all 8 characters are together, and you get a sense of how they sort of work together. So that's all I wanted to say about that. I don't know if the other gentlemen have anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted this game to be like, if you played it, it's like, wow, I feel like I discovered an unknown Final Fantasy from the 90s. Like, this is like Final Fantasy 6.5 or something.
Yeah, not just like surface level, like it has pixel art and there's turn-based battles. Like, all of us have like played a lot of JRPG, and we've like thought really deeply about how different JRPGs are structurally in the story, the pacing, the way their mechanics work. Like, really thought about that. And there's been a lot of really great independent developers who have really like pushed the envelope and really found kind of new ways to create JRPGs. And we definitely want to be part of that conversation too, but like we definitely like have really tried to like, what really made those Golden Age games work? Like, what was it they had that made them such timeless classics? And it wasn't just that they had pixel art or whatever. Like, we love pixel art too, but so
Yeah.
But it's totally Chrono Trigger vibes. So.
Yeah. Yep. You just say Chrono Trigger vibes. You could be making a first-person shooter, but you should say Chrono Trigger vibes.
Inspired by Chrono Trigger.
Just put on like every game you ever make. Yeah, it has Chrono Trigger vibes.
Earthbound vibes. Yeah.
You know what's weird
there
about
you go,
Chrono
there you
Trigger
go.
is that I've noticed, this is a little apropos of nothing, but I've noticed that like it's never time travel games that are compared to Chrono Trigger. If you thought about it, wouldn't that be like Chrono Trigger vibes? It's always games that have encounters on the field map. Just a little weird observation I've noticed with marketing.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
Maybe Radiant Historia maybe had Chrono Trigger vibes.
Oh, for sure.
I did have some listener questions that I wanted to ask you guys. So this is from Austin. He's a fellow contributor of mine. He's I guess president of our podcast or whatever. He asked, audiences tend to have a lot of expectations and assumptions about what to expect when you make an RPG. Do you find those expectations limiting, or does that not really factor into how you choose to make games?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think about. I'm always like trying to like plug my mind into the zeitgeist of what current RPG players are into, but at the same time, I think we all realize like we kind of have to make the game we want to make and be as earnest and honest about that, while still considering what some of the modern classics are doing. I wouldn't say it's restricting. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a cliche at this point. Every creative says this, but I mean, constraints really do make you creative. And I think there is something you should embrace. Like, for instance, I write music for a living, and sometimes I have to just get music done fast. And the easiest way to get there is just eliminate options. And then once I eliminate all the options I'm not going to do, then I sit down and say, what am I going to do? And then I'll just write a structure. Okay, it's going to be an AABA. The A is going to be this many bars. It's going to start on this chord. And I just like it just starts like kind of coming together. And then you could just write the song. It like allows you to be more creative. And it like feels almost unintuitive. So no, I don't feel constrained by that. I mean, there's audience expectations in the sense of like what they expect with like quality of life and game feel. And those are things you try your best to hit. People expect a certain level of quality, even amongst indies that a lot of fans are pretty uncompromising on. But I think you do the best you can on that.
I think it's really important from a marketing side of things, like in terms of customer expectations. Like, you want to make a game, and you want people who want your game to buy your game, and you want people who don't want your game to kind of like not get it sometimes, because like reviews are very important, and you don't want people to be upset or hate or tear up your game because it wasn't what they expected. And so like when you make your Steam page and you do your posts on Twitter and everything like that, like you just want to make sure that the game that you're presenting to your customer is like a game that they want to play. I don't know if that makes sense or was obvious, but
no, that makes a lot of sense, Pete. Yeah, it makes total sense, because like you think about it, like someone like I've seen reviews for indie games where it's like clearly a game that's not about grinding, and the negative review will just say this game sucks because I couldn't grind.
Who wants to grind?
I mean, there are people that grinding is a thing that people like to do. Sometimes there's games I like grind. I like Octopath Traveler. I grind to level 99 on every character. I had fun grinding. Okay. Sometimes you just want to do it. I mean, I didn't have kids then, so. But like, so like maybe what Pete's saying has a lot of truth to it. It's like maybe you just kind of put your cards on the table and say, hey, look, if you like grinding, that's totally cool. This might not be the game for you. And I want you to know that coming in, so that you don't have this expectation of that being what RPGs are. Because like that's another thing all three of us really deal with, I think, a lot as creative professionals, is like when you're working with clients, like you have to figure out when people say words what that means. Everyone has different assumptions and expectations of it. So like you ask 10 people what an RPG is and you get 20 answers.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, RPG is like a big tent genre. Like
for some people, RPG just means grinding. Like RPGs are just grinding and getting levels. That's it. If your RPG doesn't have like a field where you can just grind the same enemy 100 times, that's not an RPG. That's not what I want. So yeah, I think Pete's right. You have to really manage those expectations correctly in the marketing. That's a great insight, actually.
On the topic of what makes an RPG, though, the group that Tyler and I are both in, that question/discussion is banned. The guy got so tired of people like arguing about it, he made it a rule: no discussing what makes a game an RPG. Austin also has another question. What are your favorite anime?
Pete has a long list. I have a medium list. I mean, when I was a kid, DBZ was just like, wow. Since then, obviously DBZ is a little bit silly from the perspective of an adult because it's so formulaic that you know what's going to happen. But back in the day, man, it was that you were just blown away by it, and you'd never seen anything like that. All the cool framings and the stones rising up as someone powered up. It was just like crazy. And then kind of jumped the shark a little bit. But since then, things I still like as an adult is my favorite has got to be FLCL. And I'd say, I don't know, number 2, I don't know, maybe Evangelion original cut. And I love the Ghibli movies. That's anime technically.
Yeah,
I love a lot of
absolutely.
those Ghibli movies. Yeah, My Neighbor Totoro like gets better every year that I watch it. Like I watch it with my kids, and I'm just like, wow. I'm like weeping every time Grandma runs and hugs Satsuki. Just like every time, just waterworks, just disgusting. If I had mascara on, it'd be all over my face. Every time. I became a dad. It just like hit so much harder. I was just like, oh, okay. And then I'm trying to think of anything else. I don't know, maybe His and Her Circumstances. That was a pretty good one.
Well, Evangelion, obviously, the podcast is named Third Impact, so I agree with you.
Oh, original End of Evangelion movie.
Yes.
Original. Like anything else is historical revisionism.
I still love the rebuilds, but End of Eva, oh, so good.
Dude, it hits so hard.
So anime.
Yes.
All right, I gotta sign off for the night. We're gonna be here for another. Oh.
Yeah, no. No, so I like. So okay.
Give it your top 10.
I didn't. No. Okay, so I didn't really get that much into anime until earlier this year when my wife was like, "Hey, I want to go see the Reincarnated as a Slime movie. It's coming out in theaters, but like it's like halfway through the series, like, and so you need to have context." And she's like, "So go watch this before we go out." And so I watched that, and after I finished that, I'm like, "Okay, well now what do I watch?" And so, like, 8 months later, like I've watched like 140 seasons of shows.
Nice.
Very heavily biased towards recent anime. So,
Okay.
with that said, I have a very heavy bias on like recent stuff. But my very favorite, it's really hard. Because there's just been so much good stuff lately. There's stuff that, I thought was going to be crap, but ended up being good, like Mashal, the vending machine anime airing right now. I thought that was going to be terrible.
It's a vending machine anime?
Oh yeah, reborn as a vending machine. I now want.
We have gone
so
too far
dumb.
with isekais.
So dumb, but it's been really fun. Stuff from last.
Does any character ever say? No, I was thinking of laundry machine. I was gonna say, someone ever say like, "Let's go for a spin"? But
Well, he can transform. He can transform into other kinds of vending machines. So
Okay.
he hasn't turned into a washing machine yet. But I don't know. Like probably the one that like sticks out the most in my head was it's called Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, and just the pacing, like it sounds like a really weebish anime.
Yeah.
But it's incredibly, it plays it really straight. It's like kind of like a supernatural, like modern supernatural, metaphysical, like mystery romance slice of life thing. So like, it's just like, but like, there's no like cutaways with like, fancy backgrounds and like over the top reactions. All the characters are very like normal. And it's just like they chose to do it as an anime. And that one kind of, I think, sticks out as like probably the best one I've seen lately. That and Campfire Cooking in Another World with my absurd skill.
I've heard a lot of people liking that one as well.
Yeah, where he gets isekai'd with like a Amazon Prime subscription.
Is every anime an isekai now?
Honestly, yeah.
Maybe like 40 to 50%.
It's definitely the flavor of the season. Like there's so many isekais that have come out in the past few years.
So many. I love it. I love trash. I can't. Yeah, anyway.
Well, if you're just getting into anime, I have to recommend my favorite, which is The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya.
Okay, I'll add it to my list.
It is like mid 2000s anime, and it was like a huge part of anime culture back then. So next I have a couple of questions from Basil, one of our regular listeners. Do any of the characters have a moment where they go Super Saiyan?
Yes. Spoilers. Yes.
Spoilers, yes. Awesome.
Well, technically Ben does. He flies. Kind of like
Yeah,
some
Ben does it like kind of comically, but another character does it at a very key moment. But spoilers.
So these next two questions can be a little bit controversial, so we can choose to skip them if you so desire. How do you guys take your coffee? He really wanted to know.
I mean, I mean, my first JRPG was FF7, so of course I have my coffee with milk and sugar. I'm a very basic guy. I don't know.
If I drink caffeine, I hang from the ceiling.
Yeah, I don't drink a lot of caffeine, but when I do, I get it with like the creamy, the
the sugary, the chocolate, all that crap.
Make it taste like a unicorn.
Yeah. I figure the
Yep.
less it tastes like what it's supposed to taste like, the better. I got like that with
the
that.
mocha frappuccino.
Oh yeah. Like the energy drinks. Like everybody's like, why do you want to drink an energy drink that tastes like stale beer? Like, give me the one that tastes like strawberries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, give me a beer that tastes like strawberries.
I think
yeah.
in the Pete anime, he's gonna be isekai'd as a unicorn that drinks sugary coffee.
Like when they bring out your order, they should be looking for like a 22-year-old girl, and then
Yeah,
no,
pretty
that's
much.
mine.
Hey, no shame. I like the sugar. I mean, I'm not like, I don't do the chocolate in the coffee, but I definitely like a lot of sugar for sure.
All right. Last question from Basil. What is the best pancake syrup?
Oh, maple. Come on. Wait, that's the most basic one, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't mind like a maple blueberry. That's not too bad. You know, I'm a little worried about like how the sausage is made with that. It's kind of tasty though. But yeah, I like to go with like a Vermont maple. If I'm being honest, like a Vermont dark maple. Yeah.
Nice.
I like the strawberry syrup. Like you go to the IHOP, right, and there's like 10 syrups in the little thing, and the one that I didn't like was I always called poison berry.
Dude, that could be a skill name in Quartet.
Yeah.
There it is.
That's incredible.
Boss move.
Or that would be my familiar more, but it could be in Quartet. Anyway, continue.
All right.
Oh,
next I
actually, can I
have a
say one
couple-
thing that's really important?
Yeah.
To talk like my Gen Z friends. IHOP is low-key goated. Like, IHOP is great.
No cap.
And
IHOP's
whoever says
amazing.
otherwise is wrong.
Yeah, you don't need that kind of negativity in your life. Cut
IHOP
those
is the
people out.
FF5 of pancake restaurants. It just gets better every time you replay it.
Nice.
Lots of combinations.
There you go.
Lastly, I have a couple of questions from my friend Will, a frequent listener. He's contributed a couple of times, and we had a YouTube channel together for a time. What RPGs do you love that might not be apparent as an influence in this game?
Breath of Fire 2? I don't know. I love, and it's like it's like a trash fire that I love. That's always my one. Like, cause like I love Final Fantasy 6 and 7 in a pure, wholesome way, but I love Breath of Fire 2 like a crazy girlfriend that I had. I never had any crazy girlfriends, but if I had, it would have been Breath of Fire 2.
You love Breath of Fire 2 like I love isekai anime.
Yeah, like it's like there's an allure. It's exotic. It has many fascinating aspects. It is on fire though. It is a disaster in execution.
Yeah, maybe I'd say like Grandia 2. Well, just like musically, it's got a lot of energy. It's kind of a fun, snappy game. But I would say on a surface level, it doesn't feel anything like Quartet. So that might be a more subtle influence.
Gotcha.
Yeah, for me, like Suikoden, like lots of characters with absolutely no background or world building, but I love it. But Quartet is like the polar opposite of that. So
Yeah, thank you for not making a game where I have to collect 100 people in order to get the true ending.
that'll be my next game.
Yeah,
Well, that'll be Ayuden soon.
Yes,
that's right.
Yeah.
Speaking of 100 characters, I actually counted. We have 12 guest characters in Quartet in the
Okay,
prologues.
nice.
Yeah, so there you go.
Okay, do you guys consider Zelda to be an RPG?
Oh,
So I mean, I wrote these books. I'm a historian of RPGs at this point. I did a lot of historical research, and if you look at what RPG was in the beginning, like the 1977 manuals for D&D, you generally only gained levels when you looted the boss chest. That was how Gary Gygax really refined the game to be. That's what was happening. You would gain a level or gain XP when you looted the boss chest at the end of a dungeon or an adventure. And that is what you do in Zelda, right? Like, I mean, you can gain partial levels elsewhere, but like that, the primary loop of a Zelda game is boss chest, increase in power, right? So in a sense, Zelda is closer to that original sense of leveling up in an RPG than many of our contemporary RPGs are. And I think I'm happy that the genre has evolved. But if Gary Gygax is not right about what an RPG is, nobody will be.
That is not the answer I expected for that, but that was such a great answer. Thank you for that.
Nerd.
Yeah, man.
Mr. PhD.
My glasses got thicker.
I too think Zelda is an RPG, mainly because I'm persuaded by Pat's argument. But I could understand why people wouldn't say it is. I think a lot of it's like what is an indie? You know, it's like a lot of it's like kind of like a gut feeling, and for whatever reason, Zelda feels like not like an RPG. But I think the original Zelda designers considered Zelda an RPG as well. Like if you find reviews and interviews from developers of the time, they called Zelda an RPG. So I don't know if intent matters, but I think they saw themselves in that tradition. It was just like a different style of RPG, right?
Yeah, like I said this before, RPGs are a big tent genre. But to be a contrarian, I will say Zelda is not an RPG. It is a top-down Metroidvania.
I could.
I could see that. Yeah.
I mean, Metrovanias are kind of RPGs too, but we're not ready for that discussion.
The world just shook on its foundations.
We need to talk about. That'd be my clickbait article.
And my counter article be no, Metroidvanias are not RPG.
There's like so many of that type of genre. Like every time that a Zelda game, a Kirby game, or a Metroidvania comes out, every RPG website will review it, and I'm just like, do you guys really think these are RPGs? Like it always sparks the discussion every time like I see one of those.
Oh, there's so many like what we define as like bread and butter RPGs now that I agree that doesn't make too much sense.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you know, there's that much like marketing money and hype, and like, you know, I don't blame any of those sites for doing that.
Of course not. And last question, I think this is a great one to close on. What is your favorite Final Fantasy? I'll break the ice and tell you guys that my favorite is 4.
Oh, nice.
Yes. That's because you're awesome.
Thank you.
We actually all three played 4 recently. Not like we didn't like plan it. We just kind of all did, and I quite enjoyed it.
It was
I
fun.
think my favorite's 7. I have to be basic. I think it's more just it's partly nostalgia, but when I do replay it, every time I'm like have a new appreciation for it. Close seconds would be like 6. I love 4. I love 9, 5, but I feel like 7 just feels like the most quintessential Final Fantasy and the most idiosyncratic and like such a special game. But I think I'll have to go with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. For me, it's either 6 or 7 because, like, 6 and 7, people don't understand how historically radical 6 was because it seems like the straightforward, narrow, ordinary thing now, like a basic bitch RPG. But really, it was in its time, it was this incredibly radical departure from and very intentionally so from what was out there in terms of like, you know, medieval, class-based, large party, lots of mechanics. Final Fantasy VI departed from all of that. And so it's hard for me to say, you know, 7 continue that trend even further. But those two, they just changed what an RPG could be. And I while also being very enjoyable, like Breath of Fire 2 introduced a lot of things into RPGs that had not existed before in a lot of profound ways and was awful. Is like totally unplayable now. So like it's not enough to just revolutionize what can be done in an RPG, but to also do that and be great, and be replayable 20, 30, 35 years later. My entire body just convulsed.
Final Fantasy 7's not that old, is it?
That's like FF1.
What's like,
yeah.
7.
Yeah, that's getting up there. But like, you know, we're coming on that time. Like it's 30 years basically for Final Fantasy. 30 years next year for Final Fantasy 6.
Yeah.
Yikes. You know, but to be relevant all this time later, but also to have changed the genre so profoundly is that's just makes me just in awe of 6 and 7.
Yeah, I mean, I like FF4. Like, it was my first one. That's why. It's very simple. No, I played with my mom. I was a kid, you know, and my mom liked RPGs. And, you know, she liked fantasy, but she liked RPGs. So it was the first one I played. It was like one of the only kinds of games that she would buy. And so, yeah, it just like holds a special like place in my nostalgia brain. And like when I know like it got universally panned, but like when Final Fantasy IV: The After Years dropped on Wii and they were like eking it out like a couple like 1 or 2 chapters at a time, like every time they did that, like I would go and visit my mom and we'd play, and it was really cool to see these characters again, and you know, even though it's not really the best game, like it was like I really liked that. But yeah, no, 4 is easily my favorite.
Yeah, After Years, I liked the core chapters of After Years. It was mostly the ending that kind of lost me because it just went way off the deep end.
Oh yeah, the balancing just got like, and now you're gonna
Yeah.
grind until you're 99, and then you're gonna beat the game.
And fight every single boss from every prior Final Fantasy game to date.
Gosh, yeah.
It was
But yeah,
so
no,
much.
I really like those core chapters, like just bringing out, not just the same characters but new characters, and yeah, like I like character-driven games, man. I love the Trails games, and FF4 was like, I don't know, the first Trails game.
Yeah.
FF4 rules. Yeah, it's a fun game.
When I'm curious also, when you guys replayed it recently, what version did you all replay? Because there's
Pixel
like
remaster,
so
yeah.
many
Yeah.
good Pixel remaster.
Yeah, we all played the Pixel remaster. I
The
think.
quality of life was enormous. They
Yeah.
they cut the encounter rate in half and doubled the XP, so you get like a nice flowing, dense thing that's not exactly as long as it needs to be without any additional grinding.
And I turned
That's good.
I turned on the 4x XP multiplier at the end. It was great.
That didn't stop me from grinding. I was like, okay, this enemy will drop a Giant's Glove with a 1 in 128 chance. I'm just gonna like save scum until I get that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I play games wrong, so.
Everybody plays things their own way. There's no wrong way, really. For Final Fantasy IV, for me, the first way I ever played it was on the DS version, which I learned way after is
Ooh.
like hard mode.
Oh,
And I did not know that.
They changed like the formulas and the mechanics and like added stuff. It was
Yeah, it was a doozy. It was really difficult. But then I played the PSP version like a couple years ago, and I was like, huh, this game is way easier than I remember.
Yeah. That one is probably my favorite one.
All right. Well, I think this about wraps things up then. Again, I really want to thank you guys for coming on to the show. I had a great time. Before we get going, though, why don't you tell our beautiful listeners where they can find you on social media and how they can support Quartet?
Yeah. Well, first off, we had great time. I loved all the compliments, especially. So I'll make sure to do this again. Makes me feel really good. No. You can find us on Twitter at Something Classic. It's CLASSC, no I at the end. Something Classic on Twitter. Or our Discord is a great place to hang if you love RPGs. You just want to shoot the breeze with us about it. Discord.gg/something classic. You can look up Quartet on Steam. Just search Quartet on Steam and you should find it. Free demo. And hope to see y'all on one of those social medias.
I'm mostly on Twitter if you want to contact me. I'm at Pat Makes RPGs, since that is now my full-time job. 9-year-old me would be thrilled. My 9-year-old me didn't understand that it is a job. I also have a website where you can find out more about my books. There's like large sample chapters of my books available for free. It's thegamedesignforum.com.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. Just Twitter, wishlist us on Steam. Twitter, it's without the I. It's because Twitter has a limit. You can only have 15 characters in your name. So.
Well, thanks for that. And once again, I've been Ryan. You can find me on Twitter at midshelfryan. But honestly, I've been taking a social media break lately, so interacting on our Discord is the best way to find me. And thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Third Impact Anime Podcast. If you like what you heard on this episode, definitely check out our content archives on thirdimpactanime.com, where you can see all the previous anime series and conventions we've reviewed, as well as our other special guest interviews. If you want to support the podcast financially and access the ability to submit episode requests, head over to patreon.com/thirdimpactanime to do so. You can find the podcast on a number of social media sites, including the new Threads app, but really our Discord is the best place to find us, so find the link to join on our website. Again, that's thirdimpactanime.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
I don't know how your closing music sounds, but